For years, producers of the ages 15 to 25-ish have been wondering the same question. How do I get better at dubstep music production? The answer is here. I present to you a big old video of a lot of production tips. Will it help? I don't know, but we gotta start somewhere. I'll start out with some beginner tips, and then as the video goes along, it'll get more advanced. Number one. Alright, listen up, producer. This is the reverse reverb trick. All you do is play a short sample with a lot of reverb, record it, and reverse it. Number 2, how do you get that big, fat, banging dubstep bass? It's pretty easy. It's a sine wave. Just kidding, it's 2 sine waves. Alright, we're in Serum, the only plugin to ever exist, and we go to analog, we go to basic shapes, we go get your sine wave, go to sub, get your sine wave, put this first thing up an octave, put this level to 12, and then under LFO1, make a shapey, make a do thing like this, set it to envelope, set BPM to off, set the hertz to around 8, and then under FX, no, we're going back to the matrix, back to the basics. We go under LFO1. We set this global to master tune. Set it to 12. Now we just play our fat bass and feel those wubs. But I've been dubbed. If I use that method, then my wubs sound all messy. To prevent your wubs sounding all messy, low-cut your wubs and add a separate sub. Usually cutting your wubs around 100 Hz at 36 dB per octave sounds good. By the way, that was number 3. Number 4, how do I make a juicy wub? Well, you see, I've been trying to learn that for years, and as it turns out, it's pretty easy. Just any dubstep bass in Serum, and then it's Camelcrusher and OTT. Set Camelcrusher on British Clean. It's just 2 plugins. That's all it took after all these years. It's Camelcrusher and OTT. 2 plugins. It's Camelcrusher and OTT. After all these years, I've been trying different plugins. It's only 2. It's only 2 plugins. They're OTT Camelcrusher. OTT Camelcrusher. It's just 2 plugins. OTT Camelcrusher. Don't forget to Lowcut after that or it'll get muddy. Number 5, how do we get stereo width on your wubs? A lot of techniques that sound cool will actually destroy your sound and make it really quiet in mono, like the Haas effect, detuning, and too much dimension expander. So how do I make the good wub? Dimension expander, but only a little bit. Put the size all the way down, but put the dry wet up to around 40. Oh, also get Ozone Imager. For whatever reason, this is a Haas effect that doesn't cause problems. How does it work? I don't know. But god dang if it doesn't make my wub sound like Virtual Riot and Getter Had a Kid. Number 6, let's talk about transients. You know how you're supposed to low-cut everything that's not a sub-bass, so your sub-bass has a lot of room to punch through? You should also use that same concept with transients. Transients can build up over time, so if you have like 3 plucks going at once and they're all plucky and transient heavy, then it's going to sound really weird and distorted once you turn your volume up. So it's a good idea to use a transient shaper and decrease the attack on some elements and increase the attack on elements that you want to shine through, like drums and hi-hats. You know that cool vocal effect in Getter songs before it drops, where it's all like this and you're like, whoa, this shit's about to drop. Oh my god, it's gonna be crazy. I used to think it was a phaser or some other weird stuff, but as it turns out, it is. Well, not a phaser, it's a weird stuff. It's a frequency shifter, and you shift it up by about 13 Hertz, and you set the dry wet to 50. By the way, that was number 7. Number 8! You know how when you try to get your elements to sit in the background with reverb and EQ, like you cut off the high end, but it's still not far enough in the background? Well, I like to use the Fletcher Munson curve, which is the special kind of EQ curve that's made to cut out all the sounds that are easy for humans to hear. So it makes it really easy for elements to stay in the background. Number 9. Put a gate after your reverb. When you have a reverby sound, and you hear like the first few seconds where it's like, and then afterwards it's like, you want to cut off the reverb that you can't hear while everything else is playing. Why? Because when you compress the crap out of your track, which I know you will, all that reverb will come up again that you previously didn't hear, and it'll take up a room. Producer alert, it's rapid fire time o'clock. We're about to master Serum. Number 10, what if I told you that there's a magic button in Serum that makes your sounds sound better? What if I told you I was lying? I'm not. Go to global and then go to 4x quality. It's usually on 2. Now your sounds will be 2x better. Number 11, why don't my saws sound as good as Virtual or Riot? They sound like they're in the back of the mix. It's because you don't need 16 times unison on your saws. 7 is good enough. It sounds up front and it's still super sawy. 12. Yo dog, you making a dank trap remix out of some meme that's gonna vanish in 2 weeks? Put the vocal sample in the noise oscillator of Serum. Now when you play a note, it's all like perfect for remixes. You're welcome. 13. Hey, do you like Excision? Do you like his basses when they go near? It's called Vibrato. Here's how to set it up in Serum. Mm-hmm. 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 And you're good to go. Number 14, put that logo you made in a cracked version of Photoshop into Serum. Now you'll be turning stolen software into stolen songs. Number 15. What? You like stealing? You really like the phrase good artists steal, bad artists, well, I don't remember. Find your favorite sample from your dubstep pack that you got on the internet. Go to Serum. Go to the Wavetable editor. Type in the note of whatever sample it is, probably F0, and then drag in the sample. Number 16. Hey, speaking of stealing, I'm not above that, okay? Alright, don't tell anyone I said this, but I'm taking this next trick from AU5's YouTube channel. Definitely don't go to youtube.com/AU5 and give him the credit he deserves, okay? Yeah, so, turn on the chorus. Turn everything down except for this knob. Anyway, number 17. Number 17. In the year of our Lord 2019, it's all about the post-processing. You don't really need to go too crazy in Serum. You just need to add a lot of effects afterwards to make it go boom. That was me saying boom. I didn't even use Serum. Using plugins like OTT, Disperser, Camelcrusher, Vocodex, Ozone Imager, all these effects and more can make your square wave FM from B growl sound pretty good. Tip number 18. If you don't have enough money to buy all these expensive plugins, you can go to this you can buy them. Next tip. Number 19. Here's the good thing if you can't buy expensive plugins. FL Studio already has plugins that can do some weird stuff. You just need to hook them up with Patcher. See, with Patcher, you can do stuff that you normally can't do with FL's plugins and make them do weird stuff. Like, with mid-side EQing, you can't normally do that in parametric EQ too, but if you split up your signal into mid and side, you can hook them up together and then boom, got a mid-side EQ. By the way, if you don't know how to do this stuff, you can usually Google Patcher presets and there's some good ones for free. We're going back to the Serum tips, boys. Hit it up for number 20. Hit it up? Whatever. You know how you use a phaser or a hyperdimension in Serum and it'll turn your sound into something that has like an annoying tail at the end of it? Well, there's a way to get rid of that. You just use distortion and turn that into a volume shaper. You go to X shape and turn A to 100% volume and B to 0%. Now it's the same thing as a volume automation. 21. Steve Duda himself programmed a Riddim button directly into Serum. What you gotta do to click it is go to delay, turn it to BPM off and link on, and then you set the delay around 30 milliseconds. Congratulations, you just made a Riddim. Tip 22. Does everyone know about the Zomboy button? I'm talking about Proc Squarify. Yeah, go to Serum, click this button, go to that thing, go to that thing. This button makes any harmonics that are not in a square wave 0% volume. So yeah, you sound like 2014 Zomboy. 23. Hey, I know this is obvious, but hear me out. A lot of presets like to go over the master limit for the volume. Don't do that. It introduces digital distortion and it makes your sound whack. 24. Distortion on a vocal? Ringmod on a vocal? Oof. Ringmod and distortion on the vocal? Oof. Here's an example of Serum's Ringmod on the vocal. Wow, look at me, I'm talking. Wow, I'm talking some more. Man, does this thing sound so cool. 25! Look, all these basic Serum producers know that you can use the Wavetable editor to make your own wavetable. But the super Serum nerds know that you can use the LFO editor and holding Alt and left click, put that into the wavetable, and then, man, you got yourself your own wavetable. 26. Remember how I said not to use unison or detune because it messes up the phase of your sound? If you set the width down to 0 in Serum settings, you're good to go. It's a good way of making unique growls and such. 27. Hey, do you want to know this cool Serum trick? No? Okay. Number 20, so the trick is that normally when you vocode a sound, you lose some of the high end because just how a vocoder works. But if you split your bands into low, mid, and high and vocode just the mid band, you get kind of a unique sound and still have that full frequency range. 28. Look, I don't even turn off randomness unless you're using multiple unisons or something, like in a saw stack. Because if you're using one unison on a growl or some dubstep bass, you don't want randomness on, because every time you play back your song, your wub will be different, and that'll make it hard to mix. 29. There's this cool trick where you distort a sound a lot, but play it back really quietly. And when you mix it into a sound, it'll sound distorted but still clean at the same time. It sounds freaking dope on hi-hats and dubstep basses because it gives it that overdriven distortion-like high end without destroying the rest of the sound. 30 or whatever. Remember that tip about number 29? That was a good time. So do the same thing, except use a sub bass in that same channel and distort the sub bass and your sample at the same time. When the really low frequencies of a sub bass distort with a high frequency, it creates this really cool effect that sounds crunchy, and all you have to do to get rid of the sub bass that's probably ridiculously loud is just EQ it afterwards. Alright, you Serum lords, it's time to slow down. It's time to think back. What are we doing? Are we making dubstep wubs, or are we making art? It's time to talk about concepts. 31. Oh, things that contrast with each other sound pretty cool in music. This can apply to many things. When you're making a melody, it'll sound a lot cooler if you have counterpoint, which is having a main melody and then a secondary one that complements it with different notes. When you're making some sort of crazy saw stack that has a lot of instruments combined into one chord, it'll sound a lot fuller if you have different instruments playing at different octaves, and maybe split up those instruments into high, mids, and lows, so when they're processed differently, when they come together, it sounds full and dynamic in words. Maybe this is obvious, but having different instruments playing different speeds of notes makes the melody more interesting. If you had all your instruments playing quarter notes instead of playing like 16th notes for some instruments or slower or faster for other instruments, it would sound kind of bland compared to if they're all playing different things. 32. When you're EQing a sound and it doesn't really need certain frequencies, you should probably cut them. This will give you more headroom, and instruments that do occupy that region can be heard more easily because nothing's fighting for that room. The most common example of this is just using a high-cut filter to get rid of some stuff that you don't really need in most synths. 33. So, similar to 32, you should get rid of sounds that you don't really need to hear in your whole mix. So if you play back your whole mix and you have like 4 different hi-hat channels and you mute one and you're listening to your track and you're like, hey, this is still pretty good, and my mix is more clear because the hi-hats aren't fighting for room, maybe get rid of that hi-hat channel. 34. Also similar to those last two, when you're creating sounds or adding in samples for your background layer, make sure they're loud enough to be heard. I used to put a lot of sounds really quiet to where I thought I was just adding room and adding space even though I couldn't hear them, but when I brought up the level of my whole mix, I realized all I was doing was adding sounds that don't need to be in the mix at all, because they were taking up room and sounded really messy. 35. Okay, you need to watch this really weird video that's an hour long and from like the 90s or something. This mixing engineer teaches you how to visualize sound in a 3D space, and it's really helpful for mixing. So for example, things in your mix that are panned left or right, it would be at the very left or right of the cube. Things that are in the high end or low end would be like at the top of the cube would be high end and the bottom low end. Things that are loud would be in the front of the cube that's facing you. Things that are soft and reverby would be in the back of the cube or the side that's faced away from you. If you imagine your sound as a physical object instead of just a big old wave of sound, it can help you sculpt your mix. 36. It's important to know what phasing is. So in digital audio, your samples, your sounds, whatever, are all made up of waveforms that can go +1 or -1 in the waviness of the waveform. The closer to 1 or -1, the louder the volume. So if we were to put a sample and an inverted sample together, instead of getting louder, it would be completely silent. This is because of math. See, if you were to have -1 plus +1, you would get 0, and 0 in these waveforms would be in the very middle, which is silent. So when you're mixing your audio waveforms and such, you're effectively having thousands of little tiny waveforms canceling each other out. So how do you fix this? Well, it'd be pretty ridiculous to go through every sample and change its phase, but on certain samples that are causing trouble, you can click this button to phase invert them. So some of the frequencies that are being cancelled out are now adding volume, and this effectively changes your mix. 37. This is phase part 2. When you EQ a sound, or do any processing to it really, you're messing up the phase of the original sample. So let's say a sample is -0.5 and +0.5 on both sides. It's perfectly even. Your mixer will recognize it as 0.5 in waviness volume. But what happens if you cut the lows of it? Well, sometimes it can mess up the waveform. So now, even though you hear your sample at its normal volume, or maybe even quieter, one side might be +0.6 and the other is -0.4. But here's the thing, your mixer will read it as +0.6 or whatever value is highest. So when you slam that sample into a compressor, it's going to be more distorted than it originally could have been if you didn't EQ it. This mostly happens when you take out low end in a sound because the lower the frequency, the more volume it takes up in a waveform. So if you mess up the phase of these frequencies, then they'll fluctuate up and down. So how do you prevent all this? You can use a linear phase EQ, which will change the frequencies of a sound, but it won't mess up the phase. You can also use a plugin that has a center feature, which will shift a waveform to the center of the wave instead of being offset, which will balance out the waviness. 1738. Well, okay, just 38. Has anyone ever told you, you're cheating, you're using samples and presets, just die? Look. It's okay. Don't be ashamed, don't die. You can't make bangers if you're dead. There's a lot of controversy over presets and samples and whether it's cheating or not to use them in your songs. I think that's stupid. You should use presets if you want to and samples, as long as it doesn't make your song recognizable as just those samples or ripping off someone else. See, if you make a track using virtual Riot samples, for example, and just use those throughout the entire track, you're stealing from virtual Riot. Let's be honest. You're not really adding any creativity. But if you chop up those samples, turn them into something else, make them unique, and use a track with them, it's totally fine because you're adding your own spin on it. So as long as you use samples creatively, or at least use them in the background of your song or for stuff that's not important, I think that's perfectly fine. 39. Oh, I know this is similar to the last one, but in particular Serum presets. Since Serum is a wavetable synthesis thingy-mabobber, it's really easy to transform a popular, overused preset into something unique just by changing the wavetable. Just a little tip. Number 40. Like my grandpa always told me, can't polish a turd, nope. Back when he used to make dubstep back in the 1420s. He always stuck by that rule. And it's the same thing today. Here's why sample choice matters and you're a dumb So unless you're a genius at synthesis, you're probably going to use samples. And at some point, you're probably going to be like, wow, this sample sucks. I need to EQ it or add compression or whatever. If you have a bad sample, like a kick drum that doesn't have any attack or some sort of weird frequency oddity that's messed up in it, it's really hard to turn that bad sample into a good one. So in this example, it would be better to use a kick that has a good attack rather than trying to use EQ and compression on the first kick, which doesn't even have the thing you're looking for. Number 41. So that whole polishing a turn mindset works on pretty much everything in music, especially when you try to master a poorly mixed track. See, elements in music, especially EDM, have their own balance and weight to them. If you have like a bass sample where you cut off everything under 100 Hz and then try to turn that into a good EDM track, it's going to sound really weird. If you have your hi-hats like in the mids instead of the highs, or maybe your lead is like panned way left or right, it's going to sound weird no matter what you do. These are extreme examples, but even small examples like EQing a sound and trying to make it do something that it's not meant to do can mess up your track. And I'm talking about strictly for mixing, not sound design. So it'll sound way better if you place all your elements in the right places when you're mixing, rather than putting a master EQ on the whole track, trying to balance everything. Hey man, did you know that like 42? It's like 420 but without the 0. Okay, yeah, anyway. Speaking of adding weight to instruments and such, in digital audio, mid-side EQ can help a lot for EDM. So in general, the weight of a song is usually having mono bass and really spread apart highs. This is also important for phasing, as I mentioned earlier. When you spread apart your frequencies in the stereo spectrum, there's more of a chance that they'll cancel out. So in the high end, there's like thousands of little tiny samples going on, and in general, when they cancel out, you don't notice it because in the very high end, there's just noise to our ears. On the opposite spectrum, in the bass, if you were to hear a bass phase out of existence, it would ruin your song. So to lessen the chance of that happening, it's always a good idea to get rid of any side information or stereo information in the lows. You can do all this with Isotopes Imager, which like everyone uses for mastering, but for a good reason. Sounds good. 43. Have you downloaded a lot of sample packs and you look for a sound and you're like, oh god, which one is it? You should probably organize your samples then. What I did is split my samples into genres and split the rest like this. And if you really like a sound, you can put an exclamation point in front of it, so when you browse your samples, you see the exclamation point ones first. And you may be thinking, wow, that sounds like a lot of time and effort, and it's probably really boring to organize all my samples. Well, believe it or not, it is. But ever since I just took the time and organized it, it's helped a lot when I produce because I know where all my stuff is. Number 44. If you're starting every track on an empty project where you have to set up the mixer routing and the sidechain routing and all that stuff, it's kind of a waste of time. Before you make your next track, maybe it's a good idea to just make a template. I'm not saying reuse the same sounds over and over, but just a template to help you get started so you don't have to worry about all the in the DAW stuff that doesn't need to be done every single time. 45. So when you make your templates, it's also a good idea to add markers just to help with the song structure. Sometimes you're like, I don't know where to go with this song, I'm on an 8-bar loop, I don't know how to make a music, and then you see the next marker and you're like, oh, I should probably make a build-up. So you make a build-up and bang, you have a song. 46. But I've been dubbed, I don't know how to make a song structure. See, that's the easy part. You get your favorite song and copy it. 47. So I made this video where I was like, hey, YouTube tutorials kinda suck, and here's why. If you don't want to watch the video, the short answer is, they take forever and don't give enough information. The long answer is, they take forever and don't give enough information. Do you see where I'm going with this? It's kinda why I made this video. But my point is, for whatever reason, streaming is the complete opposite of what I said in that video, but my god, do I learn so much from streamers. Even though it takes like 4 hours, you learn so much because you actually watch people make a song. If you haven't already, go watch Virtual Riot streams, and then after that, watch Nasko streams, because, geez, they're good. They're really good. They're 48! Alright guys. I learned the super secret mastering tip from Nasko's stream. Put a mastered track in your track. Get the same kicks and snares from that track and put it on top of your mastered track. Put a transient shaper over those kicks and snares. Turn the release all the way down. And now when we listen, oh, damn, that's punchy. So you don't have to completely overpower your drums. You can just use the volume slider and just blend it in. And keep in mind that this will distort your track, but only in the drum transients of your kicks and snares. And like every dubstep track clips their drums, so like, I don't care. 49. You know how throughout the tutorial I've been using this effect and you're like, oh my god, he's in my ear again. Well, you don't need those special ear microphones to do that. All you need is this plugin called Ambeo Orbit. It's a really hard plugin to use. You move the circular thingy. Number 50, we're halfway there, boy! You know how those audio masters on YouTube and those other old dudes are like, the best thing about EDM is the kick and the bass relationship, unlike my relationships. In my opinion, what they're trying to say, simplified, is that when you have a kick and a sub bass, they should be playing different frequencies instead of fighting over the same frequency region. So in dubstep, your sub bass is usually at the very low part of the sub region, like 45 hertz, but the kick primarily takes up somewhere around 70 or 60 hertz. So when you sidechain your kick to your sub bass and you feel that subwoofer play those notes, instead of feeling the same frequencies over and over, you feel a high frequency and then a low frequency, and it creates this nice effect where they complement each other instead of feeling the same notes over and over again. 51. Add some Foley before your snares. It sounds like this. 52. Reverse your snare before your snare. 53. You can also do the same thing with kicks. 54, you can do the same thing with claps. No, I'm kidding, you get it. I'll still count it though. 55, but there is still a thing you can do with claps. If you ever have a clap and a kick playing at the same time, what you can do is shift the clap just a few milliseconds back, and it's way easier to mix and it sounds cool. This is useful for Riddim. So I made this patcher preset where you have a reverb signal and your dry signal. And what happens is, whenever the dry signal plays, it sidechains the reverb. So you only hear the reverb when the dry signal is not playing. So this prevents your mix from getting muddy and it adds space. 57. So there's another thing you can do with reverb where you put, for example, Valhalla Room on your wub track. And whenever you have space in between your wubs, you can activate the reverb. So it's kind of like a little riser that leads up into your next wub. This is different from the other tip because you can draw your own automation. So I usually draw this kind of automation because it makes it riser-ish. 58. Here's how to do this cool wub thing where you go like... All you do is have a volume automation that goes really fast to really slow. And I also automated the pitch from going really high to low. 59. Hello, I'm John Melodyne, here to sell you Melodyne, the plugin where you buy melons online. Okay, if you actually know what Melodyne is this expensive plugin where you control the auto-tune of people's voices, but you can only do it when you're not playing your project. The reason why this exists is because when you're playing with a real-time tuning plugin, like the Real Auto-Tune or Pitcher, sometimes your auto-tune can mess up the vocal, and the only way to fix it is to go into Melodyne. However, I found a way to fix most problems just by editing the tuning of the vocal. Here's an example.
I'm here once again, and I'm dealing and
And I give credit to Nasko for this tip. I learned it by watching his streams. 60. Another tip I learned from his streams is fattening up drums simply by using Pro L on safe mode and dragging the gain all the way up. See, it won't distort your drums because with safe mode, the limiter will lower the volume instead of clipping it. Oh, keep it down. It's number 61. It's the ultimate producer tip. For some reason, I've never heard people talk about this concept in relation to dubstep. It's always been to like pop or rock or some other genre, where before you master your track, you listen to your song and record yourself automating the gain of random elements over time. Instead of having a static chord or something in the background, you would automate the gain of it just a little bit by like maybe a dB over time and let it stick out or sync back in the mix over time. And it makes your mix feel alive, like it's not just static sound, it's like moving. By the way, that's a pretty big tip. Subscribe to IveBenDubbed for more. C2. Do you want your tracks to be way more louder? When you're mastering, cut below 30 Hz because most headphones and speakers don't produce those really low frequencies anyway. And your compressor will be like, oh okay, I got more room now. So you can push your track really loud and it won't distort as much. 63. When you're mastering and you're not too confident in your headphones or your monitors in terms of frequency response, use a multi-band compressor and compress everything just a little bit, and that'll help you smooth out your frequency response. Nintendo 64. These next tips are for FL Studio gang only. All you able 10-year-olds, get out of here. Don't know music theory? Psh, hit this button. Hit that button. Look, watch out, Skrillex, we got a new Mozart. 65, is your computer not very fast and you open up FL and you put in 17 serums and you're like, wow, this serum kind of sucks, it's taking up a lot of CPU, and your FL Studio crashes and you're like, man, I wish I knew something that would make my FL Studio not crash. Hit that button. Hit that button. Okay, you're good. 66. Also, if your computer is slow, make sure your buffer size is on this at least. 67. You can save more CPU by rendering out one of your mixer tracks and then turning off the effects. You can do this easily by consolidating a track in your playlist. This is the same thing as Ableton's freeze and flattening, but like, it's Ableton, like who cares, you know? 68. This wouldn't be an FL Studio tutorial on YouTube if I didn't tell you to click Control L when you're linking something to a mixer track. Number 69. The fastest way that I link a channel to a new mixer track is I click on the channel and then I click under the 3 lines where it says track in the top right. Number 70. Make sure to use the option to hide the browser on the left unless you mouse over it. It makes FL Studio feel a lot more open, especially on a small laptop screen. 71. If you're a pro MLG gamer like me, you know you have the best Razer products. And with Razer products, you can set up the extra keys on your mouse and keyboard to do special things in FL Studio. So for me, I have copy, paste, and F6 on my mouse because you can use F6 to open the channel rack. And if you use the letters C and P, those are special functions in FL Studio for copy and paste. 72. For some reason, FL Studio has a bunch of stuff that you don't need at the top of it. So you can right-click, edit it, and get rid of the stuff that you don't need. Feel free to copy my setup. That's pretty much all you need. 73. Did you know? In FL Studio, you can set up special keyboard typing preferences. Normally in FL Studio, when you play on your keyboard, it plays all the piano notes. But if you want to be in key, right-click on this icon, choose it from the drop-down menu. 74. Make sure you're backing up your stuff. It really sucks when your hard drive fails and you lose everything. So make sure that 1, autosave is turned on, and 2, you back up your projects and your samples to an online cloud storage like Google Drive or something. 75. My last FL Studio gang exclusive is that whenever you save a plugin as a favorite, whatever you had open at the time will be the default preset. This is useful on EQs because I always low-cut stuff, so I might as well set my default preset as a low-cut. 76. Okay, everyone back in the building. Yeah, Ableton, Logic, YouTube Studio One, Bitwig, GarageBand. Yeah, you can stay out. Anyway, something a lot of big producers do to make their songs sound full is to just add a little bit of crowd noise or white noise in the back of their mix. 77. What you can also do to add more energy to a drop is add white noise hits or crash cymbal hits whenever a kick and snare plays, but make sure they're low volume and sidechain them to the kick and snare. I learned this from Wooly's stream. 78. Guys, keep it down. It's one of IveBenDubbed's genuine secret production tips. Manipulate your audience into liking your song by turning down your song's volume just a little bit before the drop. 79. Still not confident in your songs? Need to manipulate your audience more. Shrink the stereo width of your song before the drop. 80. Dang, you still don't like your song? Okay. Take a high shelf and lower the amounts of highs in your song before the drop. 81. Take out the lows of your song before the drop. 82. I don't even know if I should give out this last tip. It might be too much power. But I trust you. I'll do it anyway. Make an automation clip where you add reverb and then take it out before the drop. 83. When you're adding reverb to your kick and snare, make sure the reverb stops before the next sample plays. This way your transient of your kick or snare will be preserved without it being taken up by the reverb. Or you can just sidechain the reverb to the sample itself. 84. Make sure to turn off any reverb plugins that are still playing before the drop, because when the drop hits and you still have reverb from the build-up, then some of your drop will be muddied up by the reverb that was in the build-up. 85. Guys, I got another IveBenDubbed pro tip secret genuine production hack. Are you ready? For autochords.com. How much am I getting paid to promote this? None. I'm not sponsored by them. So if you don't know what chords are in your scale, so F minor, you can go to this website and it'll tell you all the chords that are possible in F minor. 86. What, you still don't know music theory? Psh, don't even worry about it. There's this program called Autotonic, and yeah, it costs money, but what you can do is set your MIDI keyboard to play any scale you want to just on the white keys. So if you know how to play C major, now you know how to play every other scale in existence. And I'm not sponsored by them, by the way. 87. If you're having trouble understanding tonal balance of songs, like, is your song balanced in terms of EQ? Try this plugin called Tune. What it does is it lets you play a song and then it'll randomly go up and down in frequencies. So like maybe it'll go up by 3 dB of 16K and you have to guess which frequency changed. After a while you'll learn what frequencies need to be up or down and you'll learn how to balance your own song. It's free and I'm not being sponsored by them. 88. So this is kind of a concept tip, but I've noticed that the mids are where the melody and vocals lie in a lot of songs. So if you're like Virtual Riot, I've noticed what he does is that in his dubstep where it's all about melody, he'll have the melodic parts, like the synths in the center, like the mid frequencies, and the wubs in the lower and the higher register, because the melody is all about, well, the melody, and that mostly takes place in the mid frequencies, but wubs are all about like feeling, and sub bass and really high frequencies are more about feeling than the melody itself. 89. Do you have this problem where you have an 8-bar loop and you're like, whoa, this sounds dope, but I can't make a whole song out of it? I would suggest that you work on the intro of your song before the drop. I've never had writer's block that way, but I've had it doing it the other way, where you work on the drop first. And you're getting a double dose, a 2-for-1 IveBenDubbed genuine special for this one, because I feel like that answer doesn't solve the problem if you're struggling with that right now. I would suggest dragging in one of your favorite songs and putting the build-up before your drop. This might spark some inspiration. You'll be like, hey, I want to copy this song, so then you do it, and then you're like, man, am I glad I subscribed to IveBenDubbed. Look, 90, by the way. Like, I'll be honest, I'm running out of, like, producer tips, you know? So I'm gonna go to, like, artist tips, if that's okay with you, because, you know, kind of an artist, too. Alright, yeah. So I got this tip from Il Gates, and he discusses this in his video, The Il Gates Methodology, where he talks about purple cow music. Basically, what he's saying is stop being generic and make some wild, crazy shit that no one's ever heard. And even if your production skills suck, it'll gain traction because someone that sees a cow on the side of the road will be like, oh, it's a cow, whatever. But if they see a purple cow, they'll be like, whoa, I'm gonna take a picture of this and share it with all my friends. 91. When you're meeting new producers, the first thing you shouldn't do is say, hey, want to collab? You want to build up a real friendship, and I don't mean a manipulative friendship. I mean an actual, like, hey, what's up? Not much. You want to see this meme? Yeah, that kind of friendship. And then ask to collab or, like, share your songs or whatever. You don't really have to be best friends, but just don't treat them like a promotion tool. 92. Just because you spend a long time on a project doesn't mean it'll be good. Especially when you're first starting out, you don't really know what you're doing, so you'll spend a lot of time on a project and be like, yeah, look at all this detail. And then, like, 6 months later, you'll be like, oh, I should have made more songs quickly rather than one song for a long time. 93. Speaking of wasting time on stuff and allocating time, Ill Gates in his video The Ill Methodology talks about how you should split up your sessions into nighttime and daytime sessions. Basically, he means that if you have enough time to produce a big old song, use that time to make a big old song. But if you only have like an hour or so, make your own sample pack or organize your samples or look up tutorials. 94. If you're confused about what I meant by sample packs in that last tip, it's a good idea to make your own sounds, like your own Serum presets or drum samples, and place them in a folder that's dedicated to your own sounds. So you have your unique sounds, and they're ready to go on whatever project you want to make. Or you can sell them and make money. 95. Speaking of making money, you don't need to just sell your songs. If you're really in this just to make money and you hate art, go fuck yourself. But second of all, you can diversify your earnings by selling stuff like one-on-one conversations via Skype or Discord, merch, track reviews, preset packs, sample packs, mixing, mastering, all this stuff. By the way, if you actually just produce music to make money, there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone wants to do what they love to make money. Wow, I came here to learn, not to feel. Don't worry, you will learn in these last 5 final tips of all time. Despite all odds, you were strong. You made it through. You got to the last few minutes of a YouTube video. Now, you will be rewarded with the last final 5 tips. 96. So if your song is boring, what you can do is chop up your song, and if you have a MIDI keyboard or if you use FL Studio's performance mode, you can turn your song into a mashup by playing notes on your keyboard or whatever, and suddenly your song is more like an instrument rather than just hitting the play button and adding stuff as you go. 97. Is your song still boring? Copy the bass pattern of your favorite dubstep song, and then add your own sounds on top. Oh, also change up the bass a little bit so it doesn't look like you copied. 98. You still slacking on ideas? It's okay. Just take a few days off and... Just kidding. Go play some random samples you have in your project. Swap them out for different parts of the song. Like if you have a lead melody, copy the MIDI and put it in some other instrument. This can lead to great happy accidents, as Bob Ross calls them. That's also how the song Like a G6 was made. Someone copied the lead melody and put it in the bass by accident. 99. To make sure you don't start out your song boring, just use a kick, snare, and sub bass. These are the rhythmic elements of your song, so if you can make the rhythm sound cool, the rest of the song will be fine. Well, you know, it won't be boring at least. Guys, it's number 10-0. The big number in the title of the video. The one that you probably clicked because you're like, whoa, I'm going to learn 100 things? That's a lot of things. I think there's only one way to end this. You need to learn about the one, the only. Take it away, boys. There's a plugin close to me. It has 3 letters, OTT. Open FL, hear that beep. OTT is there for me. Don't know how to mix, don't know how to master. OTT is what I'm after. Mixing tool or sound design. OTT is just fine. OTT, OTT. The plugin that is there for me. OTT, OTT. Best part is that it's free. Mixing tool or sound design. OTT is just fine. OTT, OTT. The plugin that is there for me. OTT, OTT. Mixes songs just for me. Don't know how to mix, don't know how to master. OTT is what I am after. Yeah, so if you're looking for singing tutorials, I don't think I can help you, but this is my first time making such a big video. It took a long time to make and edit, so if you liked it, give it a like, share it with your producer friends, and subscribe for similar content like this. Probably not a big video, but you never know. Catch you guys next time.